On a silent moonlit night, deep in the forest, a mysterious sword is shining. Edwin stands still, his heart burning with a storm. Will he take this sacred sword and avenge his father's killers? Will he fight the Anglo-Saxons and change the fate of his land? This is not just a battle. It's a promise, a kingdom, a dream. Join me as we uncover the true story of the Anglo-Saxons, a tale of courage, blood and destiny. Whispers of the Jungle. Part 1. The Journey of Solitude. The night was deep. The clouds repeatedly hid the moon, and the silence in the jungle was so profound that the sound of one's own footsteps could stir fear. Somewhere far away, an owl hooted loudly, and a shiver ran down Edwin's spine. Exhausted, Edwin leaned against the trunk of an old tree. His breath came in ragged gasps. His clothes were stained with blood and marked with dirt. Traces of sweat and tears were still visible on his face. Suddenly, the sound of a twig snapping broke the silence. Edwin immediately grabbed his stick and peered into the darkness. Edwin shouting, "Who's there? Show yourself!" For a few moments there was no reply, only the rustling of leaves in the wind. Then there was movement in the bushes. Edwin tightened his grip on his stick. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting a faint light. His face was wrinkled, but there was a strange light in his eyes. He held a burning torch in his hand, its flame flickering in the wind. The monk slowly approached and spoke. "Edwin, I have been waiting for you." Edwin blinked in astonishment. "How do you know my name? Who are you?" The monk smiled but did not answer. He pointed towards the ruins of an old chapel and said, "Come with me. The time has come for me to tell you the truth." Edwin took a hesitant step forward. "What truth? What do you want from me?" Seriousness filled the monk's eyes. "The truth that will change your destiny. But if you refuse, your story will end just like your villages." Thunder rumbled. The wind grew stronger. It was as if the jungle itself was watching them. Edwin slowly followed the monk. The path was rough, with thorny bushes blocking the way. With every step, a mix of fear and curiosity grew in his heart. A wolf howled in the distance. Edwin said, trembling, "Where are we going?" The monk gave a brief answer. "To the place where it all began." Walking on, they reached the ruins. The place was desolate. Broken pillars, moss-covered walls, and scattered stones lay all around. The monk stuck the torch near a stone and said, "This is the place where your father fought his last battle. This is where your story begins." Edwin stopped in his tracks. "How do you know about my father?" The monk's voice was heavy. "I was there that night when your village was attacked. I saw how everything was burnt. I saved you because you were not meant to die yet." Tears welled up in Edwin's eyes. "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" The monk took a deep breath and said, "I am not your enemy, but your guide. But now you must decide. Will you take revenge or accept your destiny?" Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew and the torch went out. Darkness fell. From a distance, the sound of chains rattling was heard. Edwin's heart pounded. Where is that sound coming from? The monk turned his head, looking into the deep shadows, and said, "They have arrived. The attack of the shadows." The darkness was now so deep that Edwin couldn't see his own hand, only the strong gusts of wind and the heavy sound of chains, as if someone had risen from very old graves. Edwin said, trembling, "They have arrived? Who has arrived?" The monk said softly, "Be quiet, and don't look back." Edwin's heart pounded faster, but as he turned to look back, two red eyes glowed between the trees. Then another, and another. It seemed as if dozens of eyes were peering from the darkness. Suddenly the rattling of chains in the bushes intensified, and a shadow appeared. It was a tall, thin, and strangely twisted being. It held a rusty weapon in its hand, and a heavy chain around its neck dragged along the ground. Edwin took a step back. "Who are they? Are they human or something else?" The monk slowly relit his torch. As the light spread, it revealed that the shadows were actually the skeletons of former soldiers, no longer living but as if someone had forced them to walk. Their eyes glowed with a red light, and their bodies were covered in rusty armor. The monk said, "These are not your enemy's slaves. They are the guardians of your own history. They are the keepers of this land's secret." Edwin's breath hitched. "But why are they looking at me?" The monk came closer and said, "Because they know who you are. You are the last person who can break their covenant." Suddenly a skeleton swung its chain and struck the ground. A terrifying sound echoed in the jungle. Edwin was about to step back when the monk grabbed his hand. "If you run, they will kill you. If you stand your ground, your trial will begin." Edwin took a deep breath, trying to control his fear. "Trial? What kind of trial?" The monk raised his torch and said, "You must pass through them. Surviving them is the first step. If you do this, you will become worthy of your destiny." Edwin looked around. The skeletons had surrounded him. There was no way to escape. Suddenly, the monk threw his torch on the ground, and a fire spread, scattering light all around. The skeletons began to screech, and one by one, started moving toward Edwin from within the fire. Edwin held his stick firmly. He told himself, "This is my time. Either I will end here, or I will begin anew." The first skeleton attacked him. Edwin swung his stick with all his might. With a bang, the skeleton fell back but immediately got back up. The monk's voice echoed, "Remember, what's more important than killing them is not to be afraid. If you defeat fear, they will scatter on their own." A new courage surged within Edwin. He swung his stick again, but this time there was no fear in his eyes. The second skeleton fell to the ground and turned to ash. One by one, the rest of the skeletons began to vanish. As the last one fell, a deep silence fell over the jungle. Edwin, panting, sat on the ground. The monk came close to him and said, "You have passed the first trial, Edwin, but this is just the beginning." The moon emerged from behind the clouds. Its light fell on the ruins, revealing a mysterious door that was not visible before. The monk pointed at the door and said, "The next path you must take yourself. What lies there will either break you or make you what you were born to be." Edwin stared at the door. His heart pounded. He knew that there was no turning back now. Behind the door, in the moonlight, the door looked even more mysterious. Edwin slowly reached out his hand. The wood of the door was cold and damp, as if no one had touched it for centuries. The monk said, "Remember, whatever you find there will be a test of your courage. If you hesitate, this door will be closed forever." Edwin closed his eyes for a moment and pushed the door. A creaking sound came, and the door slowly began to open. Inside it was pitch dark, but as soon as Edwin stepped in, torches lit up on their own. It was a long tunnel that went deep into the earth. The air was damp and smelled of old soil. The sound of Edwin's footsteps echoed, and from a distance the sound of dripping water was heard. With every step, his heart beat faster. Suddenly the tunnel opened into a hall. The hall looked like an ancient temple. The walls were covered with paintings of soldiers from ancient times, scenes of battles, bloodshed and coronations. In the middle of the hall was a stone throne. A rusty sword rested on it, giving off a faint light. The monk said softly, "This is the first sword of England. It is stained with the blood of all those who gave their lives to protect this land. But it awakens only for those chosen by fate." Edwin looked at the sword closely. Suddenly a resonant voice echoed in the hall, neither male nor female, just a deep and ancient voice. "Who is it that dares to touch our legacy?" Edwin's hands were soaked with sweat. The monk bowed his head and said, "This is your time, Edwin. Go forward." Edwin touched the sword with trembling hands. As he held it, the entire hall shook. The images on the walls came to life. The screams of soldiers, the clatter of horses' hooves and battle cries echoed. Edwin found himself standing in another era, an era when the 7 kingdoms were fighting among themselves, when Hengist and Horsa were conquering the land with their armies. Before him was a battlefield. Bodies were scattered, fires were burning, and a young boy, just like Edwin, was fighting among the enemies. The monk's voice echoed, "This is your past and also your future. This is the war you have to fight again. Decide. Do you accept this destiny?" Fire filled Edwin's eyes. He raised the sword with a roar and said, "If this is my destiny, I accept it, and I will change it." Light spread in the hall. A glow emerged from the sword, and a new power came into Edwin's hand. But at the same moment, a loud explosion came from outside the tunnel. The monk started and said, "They know that you have awakened. We must leave here immediately. Edwin fastened the sword to his waist and ran towards the door. The tunnel was now shaking, and stones began to fall from above. The tunnel's prison. The sound of falling stones was echoing. Edwin grabbed the monk's hand and started running. The walls of the tunnel were shaking as if they were breathing. The monk shouted, "Hurry! If this door closes, we will be buried here forever." Edwin fastened the sword to his waist and ran with all his might. Suddenly, a large stone fell in their way. Edwin drew the sword for the first time. As he struck, the stone split into 2 pieces. The monk's eyes widened in surprise. This sword can change not only strength but also destiny. They both reached the last part of the tunnel. The door was opening outwards, but outside was smoke and noise. Some people were on horseback, holding torches and spears. The monk whispered in fear, "These are Hengist's men. They have found out that the sword has awakened." Edwin suppressed the fear in his heart and said, "Then tonight let's show them that we are no longer slaves." He stepped out of the door. In the moonlight, Edwin's sword shone. The enemy's horses stopped as if someone had held them back. A rider shouted, "This is the boy who attacked the caravan. Capture him alive." Edwin stamped his foot on the ground and roared, "Come on, today we'll see which of you goes back alive." The enemy advanced. Edwin made the first strike and brought down a rider along with his horse. The monk started chanting a prayer in the background. But the enemies were too many. Edwin was fighting bravely, but there were spears and swords all around. Suddenly, an arrow struck the monk's shoulder. The monk fell. Edwin screamed, "No, you can't fall." The monk said in a weak voice, "Edwin, take the sword to the middle of the jungle. Don't let it fall into their hands." Fire surged in Edwin's heart. He picked up the monk and ran towards the trees. Behind him, the sound of the enemy's horses' hooves could be heard. The moonlight was showing the way in the jungle. Edwin knew that if he stopped, it would all be over. But behind every branch, in the shadow of every tree, danger was hidden. Finally, he reached the edge of a ravine. The enemy was close behind. The monk said with his last breath, "Jump from here. Save the sword." Edwin looked into the darkness below. He could hear the sound of water. He held the sword close to his chest and jumped. The cold shock of the water engulfed him. When he came up, the enemies were standing at the edge of the ravine, watching, but they did not shoot arrows. One of them said, "Leave him. If he survives, we will meet again." Edwin kept floating with the water current. In the silence of the night, only the sound of water and the distant laughter of the enemy echoed. The companion of the darkness. The sound of the water was now fading. Edwin hit a large stone and drifted to the bank. He pulled the monk out and laid him on dry ground. In the moonlight, the monk's face had turned pale. Edwin said, panicked, "Have courage. We've survived." The monk gave a slight smile and said, "You have survived, but the real war has just begun." The sound of wolves howling came from a distance. Edwin looked around. The jungle was completely unfamiliar. He had no food or means to light a fire. Suddenly there was a rustling in the bushes. Edwin grabbed his sword. From the darkness a tall person appeared, holding a torch and a bow. He said, "If life is dear, put your weapon down." Edwin held his sword firmly and said, "This is not my weapon, it's my responsibility." "Step back!" The person looked at Edwin closely, then said, "Yes, you are the one mentioned in the old prophecy." Edwin was startled. "Who are you?" The person came closer and held the torch near Edwin's face. "I am Aldrich, the guardian of the forest. It was my duty to save you, and it seems you have angered the enemy." Edwin pointed to the monk. "He will die if we don't do something." Aldrich nodded and whistled. 2 more people came out of the bushes. They lifted the monk and said, "Our tribe is close. There are healers there." For the first time, Edwin felt a sense of relief. But his heart was in turmoil with questions. What prophecy? Who is this Aldrich? And why is everyone after this sword? In the last part of the night, they reached a hidden village inside the jungle. In the light of the torches, wooden houses and high fences were visible. The old woman cleaned the monk's wound and said, "He has a chance to live, but you must decide soon. The enemy is looking for you." Edwin said to the village chief, "I will fight them all, but not alone." The chief looked at Edwin carefully and said, Tomorrow night is your trial. If you succeed in the forest's trial, this tribe will stand with you. Otherwise, both you and your sword will be a threat to us." Edwin placed his hand on the sword and said, "I accept every trial." In the light of the fire, there was a sparkle in his eyes. The coming night was decisive. Either Edwin would make allies or remain alone forever. The forest trial. The night had grown deep. The people of the tribe were gathered around a large bonfire. The chief struck a wooden staff on the ground and announced, "Edwin, tonight you must face the trial of the forest. You must survive in the jungle all night and bring back the sign that will grant you acceptance." Edwin fastened the sword to his waist and said, "Tell me, where will I find that sign?" The chief silently pointed. Aldrich stepped forward and said, "This is not an easy journey. You must find the cave where the red stone lies between the northern trees. But beware, the one guarding that cave is not just an animal, but the spirit of the jungle." Edwin took a deep breath and left the village. The moonlight was his only guide. Leaves rustled, as if someone was walking along with him. A strange sound was heard at some distance, a mix of roaring and moaning. Edwin slowed his steps. Suddenly a black shadow ran out in front of him and hid behind the trees. Edwin's heart began to pound. He drew his sword and said slowly, "Come out, whoever you are." A few moments later, a ferocious dog-like creature emerged, its eyes glowing like fire and its teeth stained with blood. Edwin held his sword straight and struck at the creature. The creature jumped like lightning, but Edwin saved himself. After several minutes of struggle, the creature fell to the ground, but before dying it let out a strange sound, as if it was giving a warning. "He is here!" Edwin felt drenched in sweat. He moved forward and finally reached the cave. Inside the cave it was pitch dark. Edwin lit his torch and stepped in. A cold wind came from inside, and a whisper-like voice said, "Go back. This place is not yours." Edwin's hands began to shake, but he strengthened himself and continued into the cave. The secret of the red stone. Inside the cave there was dampness and silence everywhere. The light of Edwin's torch danced on the walls. Strange carvings were made on the walls, some of humans, some of animals, and some that were impossible to identify. Edwin said to himself, "This is no ordinary place. It looks centuries old." Walking on, he reached an open area. In front of him was a stone pedestal on which rested the red stone. The stone was giving off a faint light, as if it were alive. Edwin had just extended his hand when a thunderous voice suddenly echoed in the cave. "Who is disturbing my rest?" The torch shook violently. Edwin stepped back. A large shadow emerged from the darkness. It looked like a human, but its body seemed to be a mixture of trees and animals. "I am Edwin," he said with courage. "I have come here to prove my bravery." The creature came forward. Its eyes were glowing with a green light. "This stone is not for everyone. It is only given to the one who kills the fear in their heart. Can you face your fear?" Edwin raised his sword and said, "I have come to face my fear." Suddenly the cave began to shake. Shadows began to emerge from the walls. These shadows were in the form of all the people Edwin knew. His parents, Oswald, the villagers, and each one was accusing him. "Why didn't you save us? Why are you alive and we are dead?" Edwin became frightened. A loud noise echoed in his ears. But then he remembered Oswald's last smile. He shouted, "I haven't given up. My life is not over yet." As soon as he said this, light spread in the cave. The red stone shone brightly and fell at Edwin's feet. The creature nodded its head and said, "You have defeated your fear. This stone is now yours. But remember, the real war is yet to come." Edwin picked up the stone. A strange power flowed into his grip. The darkness of the cave began to disappear, and Edwin moved towards the outside. Now there was no fear on his face, but determination. The secret shadow. When Edwin came out of the cave, morning was breaking. The moonlight had faded, and the sounds of birds were echoing in the jungle. But Edwin's heart was still pounding. It wasn't just fear, but a strange feeling that someone was behind him. Suddenly there was a rustling in the bushes. Edwin drew his sword and turned back. There was no one, only leaves rustling in the wind. He moved forward, but as soon as he turned, a person came out from behind a tree. He was tall, dressed in black, and his face was covered with a mask. A red glow was in his eyes. He said slowly, "You have acquired the stone, Edwin. But this stone is not just your trial, it's ours too." Edwin held his sword straight. "Who are you?" The masked man gave no answer. He suddenly disappeared, as if the ground had swallowed him. Edwin stood still for a few moments. Then he gripped the stone firmly and moved towards the village. Only one question was on his mind. Who was this person, and how did he know about me? When he reached the village, Aldrich and the chief were waiting for him. Edwin placed the stone in front of them. The chief said in surprise, "This stone is a sign of your bravery. But why is there no peace in your eyes that a successful warrior has?" Edwin answered slowly, "Because what I saw, it told me that the real danger is still to come." The villagers looked at each other. The determination in Edwin's heart grew even more. He knew that what was coming was a threat not only to him, but to the entire land. The secret of the masked man. The night had grown deep again. Edwin was sitting outside the village, the stone next to him, and the faint light of the fire on his face. Suddenly, the same rustling in the wind was heard again. This time, Edwin immediately stood up, grabbed his sword, and said, "Come out! I know you are here!" The masked man appeared from behind the bushes. But this time he was not alone. 2 more shadows were standing behind him, both holding spears. Edwin said angrily, "If you want to fight, then fight. Stop this game of hiding." The masked man came forward and took off his mask. Edwin was shocked. It was the same person he had heard stories about in his childhood, Arkan, the runaway soldier of Northumbria, who was called a traitor. Arkan said in a low tone, "Your villagers consider me a traitor, but the truth is, I am the one who has known Hengist's secrets for years. This stone is not just a symbol of power, it's the promise of an old covenant. If you have taken it, you must awaken the 7 kingdoms." Edwin said in surprise, "The 7 kingdoms? They always fight among themselves. No one trusts each other." Arkan smiled. "That's why you were chosen. Your job is not just to fight, but to unite them under one flag. But this path will not be easy. Tonight, Hengist's army is marching towards Mercia. If you don't warn them, they too will burn, just as your village did." Edwin hit the ground with his hand and said, "I don't trust you, but if what you say is true, I will leave tomorrow." Arkan pointed to the stone and said, "This stone will take you where you need to go. But remember, if you lose courage, neither this stone nor your land will be saved." The masked man and his companions disappeared into the darkness of the night. Edwin looked at the sky. The stars seemed to have come closer, as if everyone was watching him. Suddenly the village bell rang. Someone came running and shouted, "Edwin, the nearby settlement has been attacked. Hengist's soldiers are close." Edwin picked up his sword, fastened the stone to his waist, and said, "The time has come. I am no longer just a farmer. Now I am a soldier of my land." From a distance, Hengist's army could be seen advancing with torches. Drums were beating, and the sound of horses' hooves shook the jungle. Edwin looked at his companions and said, "Tomorrow's morning will decide whether we remain slaves or become free." The gathering storm. The night after the attack felt cursed. Smoke still clung to the air, and the stars seemed dimmer, as if even the sky mourned the dead. The surviving villagers huddled around a dying fire. No one spoke for a long time. Only the sound of crackling wood and distant owls filled the silence. Edwin sat with his head low, the sacred sword lying across his knees. Its surface reflected the firelight, almost glowing like a living thing. The old monk, frail but awake, finally broke the silence. "Edwin," his voice was raspy but firm, "tonight was only the beginning. They will return, not as raiders, but as an army." Edwin looked up. His face was streaked with soot, but his eyes burned with something new. "Then we cannot wait for them to come. If we sit here, we will watch them burn every house until nothing is left." Aldrich, the strongest man of the village, clenched his fist. "We are few, Edwin. If we march, we die. If we stay, we die slower. The tribes of the northern woods owe no loyalty to Hengist, but they owe no loyalty to us either. Will they even listen?" Edwin stood. "They will." Because this sword is more than steel. It is a symbol. If they see it, they will know the land still fights back. He turned to the crowd. Gather every man who can hold a spear. At dawn we marched to the northern woods. Murmurs spread among the villagers, fear mixed with hope. For years they had been farmers and herdsmen. Now they were being asked to fight. Some nodded, others looked away. That night, Edwin, Aldrich, and a young messenger named Bran set out before sunrise. The forest was dark and damp, the mist coiling like ghosts around their legs. Strange cries echoed. Wolves, owls, maybe worse. "Are you sure this path is safe?" Bran whispered. Edwin tightened his grip on the sword. "No path is safe anymore, but we walk it anyway." After hours of walking, they reached a great clearing where the northern tribes had gathered. Dozens of warriors stood in a circle, their spears glinting under the pale light. Their chief, a tall, scarred man with white paint across his face, stepped forward. "Who comes to the land of the free?" he said. His voice was like a growl. Edwin took a step forward and unsheathed the sword. The moment its blade caught the light, the warriors stiffened. "This is the sword of my forefathers," Edwin said loudly. "My village burns. My people die. But I will not kneel to Hengist. I ask not for pity. I ask for brothers in battle. Stand with me, and we will remind them this land is not theirs to claim." The chief walked slowly toward him until they were face to face. "You speak with fire. But why should we spill our blood for your fight?" Edwin raised the sword high. "This is not just my fight. This is the fight of every man who wishes to keep his children free. Tonight they burn my home. Tomorrow they will burn yours." The night before the battle. The forest was alive that night, with firelight, with the sound of axes sharpening blades, and with the quiet prayers of those who knew they might not see another dawn. Men forged crude weapons from farm tools. Women tore old cloth to make bandages. Children sat silently, watching, sensing the storm about to break. Edwin sat alone at the edge of the camp, the sword resting beside him, its edge glowing faintly. He turned the stone Arcan had given him in his hand. From the shadows Arcan appeared once more. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "you will either unite this land or die trying." Edwin did not look away. "If that is my fate, then I will die standing." Arcan studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Remember, Edwin, a sword can win a battle, but a heart can win a war." As Arcan vanished back into the darkness, Aldrich approached. "Your men are ready, but they need you to speak." Edwin stood, feeling the weight of every gaze turned to him. He climbed onto a fallen tree, raised the sword, and shouted, "Tomorrow they come for us. Tomorrow they bring fire and death. But we will not run. We will meet them as free men. And if we fall, we will fall on our feet, not on our knees." The men shouted back, a sound that rolled like thunder through the woods. That night no one slept. Some sharpened blades until their fingers bled. Others stared silently into the fire, whispering the names of their dead. Wolves howled in the distance, as if calling to the moon to witness what was about to happen. When dawn came, the fog was thick, and the sound of distant drums echoed through the trees. Hengist's army was coming. Edwin tightened his grip on the sword. "Today," he whispered, "we write a new page in history." The men lined up. Spears and axes glinted in the pale light. Hearts pounded. The air smelled of fear and courage. The first battle. As morning broke, there was a different kind of silence in the jungle. Edwin tied the stone to his waist, grabbed his sword, and gathered the surviving villagers. Among them were old people, young people, and some women who held sticks and old spears in their hands. Edwin said in a loud voice, "Today we will fight for our homes. We are few in number and we have few weapons, but our hearts are alive, and that is our greatest strength." They all put dirt on their foreheads and cried out together, "This land is ours!" The battlefield. From a distance, the rows of Hengist soldiers began to appear. Their horses were kicking up dust, and the sound of drums echoed in the jungle. Edwin chose a hiding place, positioning the people behind the trees. When the army came close, Edwin gave the signal. Arrows rained down, and the first row of the enemy fell. Hengist soldiers were surprised, but they immediately reformed their ranks and attacked. Now close quarters combat began. Edwin bravely brought down one soldier after another. The villagers screamed, ran, and fought with all their might. The decisive moment. For a moment, Edwin was surrounded. A soldier struck him, but Edwin used the stone as his shield. The stone hit and shone, as if lightning had flashed. The enemy paused for a moment. Edwin took advantage of the opportunity to attack and push them back. Finally, Hengist's soldiers began to retreat. It was not a great victory, but for the first time, Edwin and his companions had pushed the enemy back. The final scene. Edwin stood in the middle of the field, covered in blood and dust. He looked up at the sky and said, "This was the first battle, and it will not be the last. As long as there is breath, this land will be free." The people cheered with joy. From a distance, the same masked person was seen on a tree. He looked at Edwin, nodded his head, and said softly, "You have taken the first step. Now the real war begins." Chapter 3 coming soon.